What if I told you that GLP-1 side effects are optional?
The tools are endless when it comes to treating side effects.
Ozempic face, muscle and hair loss, nausea, constipation. Those aren't the cost of GLP-1s. They're warning signs.
If you're having an untreated side effect, there's no reason to go up.
Today, we're talking with Dr. Mattea Rentea, a double board-certified obesity physician. And we break it all down simply, clearly, and without diet culture BS.
If you're not getting enough protein, you're not going to keep your muscle.
You're going to get the scoop on what proper GLP-1 actually looks like. I'm Elizabeth McGann, a holistic nutritionist and life coach, here to help you do GLP-1s the right way. To get our free How to Microdose Masterclass, just click the link in the episode description. You've practiced obesity medicine for a while, probably before and after GLP-1s became mainstream.
Yeah.
How did GLP-1 medications fundamentally change the way you practice obesity medicine? And what did they not replace that still matters just as much today?
Oh, no one has ever asked me this. This is such a great question. So before we used GLP-1s routinely, the options that we had actually didn't lead to much weight loss. So we had things like phentermine, Contrave, which is wellbutrin naltrexone. So we could maybe get up to 10% weight loss, but people didn't really notice when they would take these things. It wasn't as effective when they would start it. They would come off of it because of a lot of side effects. I think that was a really big thing. So phentermine is like in the stimulant category. You can have like dry mouth. You can have tangling around the mouth. You feel like you're on edge, which is the opposite of what we're trying to do with everyone. And so none of these options were particularly amazing, but we kept trying things in different combinations because we knew how sick people were. Because I think people think about weight in the sense of an aesthetic thing. And when I think about it, fat is actually highly active. I like to think about it as a really highly active metabolic organ leading to a lot of inflammation, right? Creating a lot of problems. But then after we got GLP-1s, we had a tool that was so much more broadly applicable and one more thing we could put in the mix. Now, I still use some of those older tools because everyone thinks it's only just a GLP-1, but it became where many more people could benefit. But I'll tell you what, of course, what never went away is we always have to care about nutrition, forget weight or not. And I'm actually a really big fan of, I don't get people to a certain weight. I want your health to improve. So even if you're never able to lose another pound in your life, you can get so much more healthy if you're going toward whole-based foods and working on the gut microbiome and everything like that. And so nutrition, I think, is more than 95% of the work. And then the exercise is definitely something, getting people strength training, things like that. And just liking movement more in general, sort of divorcing the idea of movement equaling weight loss. I think that's a really big thing to get to that place. And then the third thing is caring more about sleep, because I think that just as a generation, we have so much technology and so much going on that we don't realize how restorative it is or how the caffeine's affecting it. Like we just don't think about all these things. So all of that is still applicable. And of course, the behavior stuff. So really emotional eating and nervous system being on fire. Really, all these things matter. So if you throw a GLP-1 in there, if this other stuff isn't getting addressed, it doesn't work out the best long term. It can help a little, but it won't do the most. You won't end up optimal at the end.
Yeah. Thank you for that. We need more doctors like you. It's just, for sure. It's unusual.
I don't think you know this, but I grew up in a family. So both my parents are physicians. They have a traditional medical degree, but they practice more what we would say holistic medicine. Nowadays there's functional, we call it. Like there's all these different names, right? Like iterations that it goes through. But I grew up around that. So I don't think I talk about that much on my podcast. But I'm very familiar with supplements and all of this other stuff. And I think that a lot of that world gets belittled because there's not a randomized controlled trial behind it. It's like, yeah, the pharma money isn't behind it. That's never going to exist. But we know that the sort of traditional medical world does not answer everything. It's a certain percentage, but then you have to expand further with the tools you use. Otherwise, people are not getting healed all the way.
Yeah. And I love that word, even healed. It's, I think when GLP-1s are done well, it's a healing journey. And it goes in and it fixes even or optimizes the root cause of a lot of these things. And I'm curious your thoughts on even a dosing strategy. One of the things that I am seeing that these GLP-1s are getting a bad reputation for the side effects and the scary things that can happen when you're dosed really high. And it seems like the standard of care is to increase the dose until you are at the top, and then it maybe stops working, and then you're on it for life. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on how best to dose. From where I sit, it just seems logical that the minimum effective dose would make the most sense. And there might even be things you can do holistically so that you'll better benefit from a lower dose.
Totally. Years ago when, let's just take, I think it was like summer of 2022 was when Mounjaro, which is tirzepatide, came out. And the studies showed, okay, every month they went up on the medication. So I think right away when people were writing for it, that's all they knew. But it became very clear very quickly that that was not the right strategy, that people would lose too much muscle, they would be too sick, that is not, you don't necessarily get to the best results with that. So me personally, every clinician's different. I definitely do the lowest effective dose, the slowest we can go. And I'm really following several things. So how is someone feeling? Are their urges and cravings going down? Is hunger going down? The things that we're actually trying to look at as far as how their relationship with food and what's happening. And then I'm looking at what's happening with their weight. I say weight, but again, I mean fat loss. So if anyone's listening, it's not, I'm so careful with how I say this because it's not just like weight loss that we're going for. We really want the body fat to go down if you're having challenges with that. So I follow that. So if someone is losing, I just had someone earlier today that I followed up with, this person's losing 3-4 pounds a month. That's phenomenal.
I
You maybe
agree.
are losing 1 or 2 a month, but you're feeling great. And the thing I want to say that I see happen, if someone is eating whole-based foods, like let's say 90% of the time, okay, or 80%, even just like majority of the time, maybe a meal here or there is more processed, they cannot get to the highest dose quickly because it's really hard if you have a good amount of fiber on board and a good amount of, I say whole-based foods, but what you're eating really matters. I don't see those people be able to go up quickly. They would literally be vomiting. I mean, it would not work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So interesting. And I was listening in to your work. I'm not sure if I saw it on Instagram or your podcast. You were talking with a practitioner and you were getting really specific about how best to time your carbohydrates. It seemed like you have a real understanding of glucose levels and what are optimal. And, these being originally diabetes drugs where, it lowers your A1C, we can ask ourselves, are these working because it's somehow regulating glucose? And if we can do that through diet, it just seems like not enough people are talking about it. Do you see what I'm pointing at? Like specifically with nutrition as it relates to macros, everyone's talking about protein. Not a lot of people are talking about how much total carbohydrate.
Let's say that your weight never changed. You can reverse prediabetes and things like that. I did that for myself, actually. Before I ever lost weight, I reversed my prediabetes just with nutrition, right? So that is something I need people to hear that as a hope factor because not everybody responds to these meds or has the same results. And we can look at things that are not weight related, right? So that is a key factor.
That's
So
huge. How did you do that?
it was with changing to whole-based foods and the ordering of the food, right? Like making sure we get the fiber in first and then some protein and, then the carb. So caring about the food ordering, when I'm having what, right? Like if you're really insulin resistant, morning is not a great time to get a bunch of unopposed carbohydrate is the term I use. So if we've got protein and fiber in there, sure, we can bring carb in, but it's not going to be like a plain oatmeal made with water, not going to be your friend if you're significantly insulin resistant, right? So no one is talking about these things because I don't think that many physicians are actually working on the nutrition with their patients. And what I
No.
noticed, right? And I am so all about referring to people like you. And I have a nutritionist that comes into my clinic and I send to her. And that's all amazing. But there's this level at which the clinician needs to have this understanding because sometimes we have more touch points with the person. And so we need to catch these things. But getting back to the carbohydrates, I'm not actually caring about, I don't say, okay, it needs to be under 100 or under whatever. What I care about are number one, grams of added sugar. That's a controllable, right? I'm not saying you can't have fruit. I'm not saying you can't have chickpeas that have carbs in them, right? But added sugar, there might be no point to that, right? Like it's just hits your bloodstream at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And we actually as humans, we just have not evolved to be able to handle that. Let's just put it that way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I really work with people on, because everyone that's coming into my world is pretty much insulin resistant in some capacity. If not now, it's coming. And you can do labs and stuff to figure it out. But I want to say it's like less than 7 or 9% of people that struggle with weight do not have insulin resistance. So
Wow.
it's very small, right? But I'm really about balancing the carbs, the timing of the carbs. When are we doing movement in relationship to the carbohydrates? So all these things, I think, make it such that you can eat in a way that you're not constantly having to manage things. You don't feel so crazy, like I can't go to a restaurant, or, oh my gosh, I can never eat a birthday cake. It's not that. It's how are you going to manage that insulin resistance and balance things so that no matter where you are, it can work. So that's really a main thing that I work on with people.
I love that. And you did it for yourself.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And how would someone know they're insulin resistant? And we won't get too nerdy, but something they could talk about with their physician. It would show up in your blood work. Would it be an A1C, triglycerides? What is it exactly?
So one of the easiest things I would say that just applicable to everyone, I would look at your fasting morning sugar. So we
Okay.
would call that impaired fasting glucose, IFG. So technically, it's interesting. I was talking to an endocrinologist the other day, and she said anything 90 or above, I worry about insulin resistance. And so I always thought 100 and above, because technically
Yeah.
a normal blood sugar is 60 to 100. So with the sugar, I worry about the morning being 100 or above, or 90 or above, however you want to look at that. And then the hemoglobin A1C, that's the 3-month average blood sugar, is at 5.7 or above. But here's the problem. That is when we stick you in the class of prediabetes and, having a problem, but you still have a problem if it's 5.5, 5.6, right? So it's all a continuum that we need to look at. So what you were bringing up with the cholesterol, triglycerides are the first sign that you're going to start to have blood sugar problems. So when triglycerides start to go up, that's going to show up before the A1C ever goes up. So
Yeah.
when doctors know these patterns, then you can say, ooh, this is actually really a problem, because it tells me your physiology isn't working normally. And if we can work on things now, you don't ever develop that resistance. Because once you've developed it, it's really hard to treat it. It's easier to prevent it than to treat it.
So you prevent it by following the principles of a healthy diet and
Yeah.
lifestyle. You would
Yeah.
treat it by maybe just more interventions.
Yeah. It's more significant what you need to do.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
if you do that, if most people that are going on a GLP-1 are insulin resistant, would it make sense if they worked on their insulin resistance, became more, would you call that it's insulin sensitive?
Yeah. That's the
The
word
right
I
term?
like to use. Yeah.
Yeah. If they get that in a better place, would they
Mhm.
do better on a GLP-1? Would they need less of it?
So what I see is what you're saying, which is that if you're putting in place these nutrition changes and movement, things like that, you need less medication because you're helping treat it. Yes. So for example, when you're doing that morning exercise, you're helping with the insulin sensitivity in the morning. You're most insulin resistant, so you're helping with that. You're helping with the rest of the day to help things to go better. So the timing really matters. We see that if you can do morning exercise, people with significant insulin resistance do better. Now, I say that and I'm like, listen, if you can exercise anytime, amazing. But if you have an option and you can handle it in the morning, right? I'm not talking about a mom that has a baby and is breastfeeding and is up all night. I'm just saying in general, if you can build that into your routine long term, that might really help you. So things like that really make a difference. That the nutrition, you then need less medication because you're not overcoming as high insulin levels that you have to deal with.
I heard you say that side effects could maybe be optional. Side effects. And I love that, because a lot of people are afraid to use this tool because they're afraid that these terrible side effects will happen. And they often do if they're done incorrectly. I feel I really would go so far as saying that most people are doing GLP-1s wrong and having terrible side effects that might be completely preventable.
Yeah.
What are your best suggestions for not having side effects?
So starting low, going slow. My thing is you don't go up on the dose. If you're having an untreated side effect, there's no reason to go up. It's
Mm.
super inappropriate, because if you are already constipated, let's say we're on a starting dose and we go from one dose to the next dose, that would be the manufacturer's recommendation, right? So you're not in between dosing, you're jumping to the next one. You're really increasing the risk that constipation gets worse. And it's not like, well, then I'll figure it out. Why would we not figure it out already at a dose that was lower? Like if we
Mhm.
can't get it there, how are we going to get it at a higher dose? So I really think
Yeah.
people need to go slower with it. And the tools are endless when it comes to treating side effects. And I think people only think of their, like with constipation, they're like Miralax. I'm like, that's like the last one that I think of.
If that's all that's making you go, there's something that you really need to look at. I heard you talk about in one of your videos the three most important things on a GLP-1. We just talked about one of them without maybe fully talking about it, fiber, and how
Yeah.
that could help for people to have more regular bowel movements, but also just better luck on a GLP-1. Protein and fiber. Tell me how important that is for people to think about. We just talked about carbs, but let's talk about protein and fiber now.
We could talk about this for hours, right? But I'm going to condense it down to some things that come top of mind to me. So let's talk about protein and then we'll talk about fiber. With protein, if you're not getting enough protein, you're not going to keep your muscle. And your muscle is over 70% of what we call that basal metabolic rate, means you do absolutely nothing during the day and it's your metabolic engine. And so if you're losing muscle, it is so easy to lose and really hard to put on. So in the
Wow.
best of circumstances, like a woman can maybe, if she's in a calorie surplus and doing a ton of strength training, maybe put on 0.5 pound of muscle per month. So maybe 6 pounds in the year. If you lose a significant amount of weight and you lose 20 pounds of muscle, that's years potentially of being able to recover it, but not everyone will be able to, depending on what their scenario is. So we need to keep the muscle. Now, the thing I want to say is, yes, I have general recommendations of how much people need, but really, if you're following a monthly body composition, meaning you're looking at the skeletal muscle mass, you can tell what the trend is. And the way I practice, I don't want over 10% skeletal muscle loss. So wherever you started, wherever you are now, you can do the ratio of that. So where you are currently divided by where you started, whatever percentage that is, I want it 10% or less. And if it's more than that, we're getting something wrong. We either have the wrong amount of protein, you're either eating too low calorie, the carbohydrates are too low, because everyone's only thinking about protein, but they're not thinking about carbs at the same time. You're not doing strength training. It's one of a few things. It's the timing of the nutrition. So protein matters from keeping your muscle. It matters from a satiety standpoint. Protein will keep ghrelin down. That's the hunger hormone that says I'm hungry, start eating, will keep it down the longest. So we need that, right? Carbs bring it down real quick. Protein keeps it down the longest. And then I think about, longevity, things like that. And again, the protein is just, it matters more and more as we age. So what's so great is maybe you didn't know about it before, but every day that goes by, it matters even more. So now you get to do it, right?
Yes.
So that's when I think about protein. And then I think about with fiber. So yes, there's the aspect of satiety, right? Like it's the bulk in the stomach, stretch receptors, all of that. But more so than that, this is your colon cancer prevention. This is the broom in the colon. I mean, the devastating research that we're seeing come out, the rates of colon cancer in our 40s is going up. And we're seeing a direct correlation with how much processed food people are having. And basically, processed food equals low fiber, right? Low fiber, tons of additives. We can go on and on. But so that I think most people really care about, not having colon cancer. And then the gut microbiome. So I don't think people, we are realizing that if your gut health isn't there, you're not healthy. And so we don't know which comes first. Is it that the gut microbiome's off and then you get chronic disease, or that you have chronic disease and then the gut microbiome gets affected? But from the studies that I've seen, the healthier your gut microbiome, let's say if you get something like melanoma, you have an increased chance of survival if you had more diversity to begin with. So this stuff
Wow.
directly matters to
Wow.
your health long term, right? So
Wow.
this is not just about weight, and it's about you feeling good day to day. You should not be bloated all the time. You should not be constipated. We need to solve that. So there's something going on. You're eating something that doesn't agree with you, or the types of fibers that you're having don't work. But we want you to feel good. I want your gut microbiome to be good. I want you not to get cancer. So that's the lane that I'm thinking in when I think about the importance of those two.
Oh man, it's so powerful. And protein for lean muscle, keeping it, not losing it. You made a distinction between lean muscle mass and skeletal muscle mass.
Yes.
And I know you're a fan of in-body scans,
Yeah.
which I love as well and use. And they're nice because people can find them. They usually will be in a town where they live. Help us understand the distinction you're making between skeletal lean muscle and is it just regular lean muscle mass?
So lean mass includes muscles, tendon, bone. It includes everything. So there's
Okay.
a ton that's in that. When you look at skeletal muscle mass, it's just skeletal muscle mass. So think bicep, triceps, calves, things like that. And the reason that this matters is Lean mass, there's a lot of different things that are going to affect it. I don't really care about certain aspects of lean mass. Skeletal muscle mass, I want you to keep it all. So I only want to look at the thing that you can control, the thing that you can do something with. When you have lean mass, the problem is people think it equals skeletal muscle mass, and they'll tell me, I have over 100 pounds of muscle. No, you probably have like 50 pounds of muscle, and then the rest is all these other things that lead into lean mass. So the only thing that people need to do, the
Mm,
reports that they're looking at, it needs to say skeletal muscle mass. And
okay.
that's so InBody makes it really easy. I'm looking actually recently at a lot of different scales. So I'm biting the bullet with paying for
Ah,
these scales. They don't
okay.
gift them to you.
No.
So I'm checking them out. So there are now different competitors that are on the market that I think will be at a lower price point and get the same thing done. But the point is that you need something reliable that each time you get it done, you have confidence that this is accurate, what I'm seeing. Otherwise, you can't make pivots to what you're doing. If you're like, I don't know if that's right or not, then it's not helpful anymore.
Makes sense. I'm so curious. Which ones are you looking at? Are these ones you could, a consumer could buy and have in their
Yes.
home?
Yeah. So the two that I'm looking at first, and there's actually 5 or 6 that I want to check out, but the two that I'm doing first is number one, the Hume scale, HUME.
I've heard of
Okay.
this.
And then
Hmm.
the other one is the Renfo. They have, again, a bioimpedance one, not the one just with the where you just step on it, but you also have a part where you hold on with the arms and your thumbs have
Mm.
additional probe parts. So,
REN.
RENPHO, Renfo.
Okay. And okay, and you're testing them out.
So Hume, I actually talked to some representatives. So again, everything allegedly what I'm saying this, because hopefully this person had it accurate what they were saying to me. But it's interesting, they've been around for more than 10 years. And I feel like only in the past few months or a year have I really seen them.
Hmm.
So it's interesting that they're actually a wildly successful company. They've been around a really long time. They're just kind of pivoting who they're trying to reach. And so that's the reason I think why now we're all hearing about it versus it's not like yesterday they developed it. It's really been around a good amount of time.
So you suggest one of the musts for someone on a GLP-1 journey is to, before they start, ideally do body composition
Yeah.
analysis.
Because you have to know where you're starting. And the reason being, you might say, oh, it's not working. Oh, I'm only losing, I don't know, 2 pounds a month. And you don't really realize that maybe you've put on some muscle while you've lost some weight. Some people can do this. And so when you're not following that data over time, you never know, did I lose a bunch of muscle or not? People are just glorifying the net weight change, but it could be that half of it all the time is muscle. I've seen it happen. It's really scary. So if you don't know that, you can't change things. But if you had seen that, this is classic with some of my older patients, really 65 and over, because I'm all the way through 80 years old in my clinic. So it's really nice, the age range. But as we get older, just the chance of muscle loss goes up. And so when we see that, then we really pivot what we're doing. They might need way more protein or, different things, but we're able to find out within 1 or 2 months. We're not waiting 6 months to a year to figure it out.
And how often? I mean, if you had a scale at home, you could step on it every day, but how much do things actually change? Like, what's a realistic, like once a month?
Once a month, that's it. If you get on it every single day, just do the net weight, but don't body composition fluctuates a little bit. So we're looking for trends and patterns. So I would say you do it monthly, and by month 3 or 4, you're going to see a trend or a pattern. But month to month, it's really normal for the skeletal muscle mass, 1, 2 pounds up and down. Very common, but you'll see you're within, just like with weight maintenance, you might be in a certain bracket. Same thing with skeletal muscle mass. You're going to typically see it stay within that most of the time because things like, let's say you have a day where you eat less carbohydrates, it's going to look like your skeletal muscle went down because glycogen stores in the muscle went down. So little things like that. We don't want you to get to the place where you're suddenly eating carbs the night before or withholding the carbs. It's just stuff where we don't want to get into that land. So when we look at patterns, we're going to remove that aspect of it.
Bone loss, is that a real concern, especially with older clients and patients that I see? I get a little nervous about GLP-1s for, people that have osteopenia, osteoporosis. Is that contraindicated if you're, no?
No, I don't see that happen. Now, again, I do have a very unique population in the sense that people that come into my clinic are highly invested. They're doing everything I'm saying. But that, if you're doing strength training and if you're doing all the things that we want you to do, that should not suffer. So for that to happen, you need to have a lot of nutritional deficiencies happening. Probably over time, there was already something that happened that we didn't treat. So if we do it properly right now, it should not be more of a problem.
Okay, that's really good to know.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing you say the people that you work with are doing what you're telling them to do. Tell me more. I know you have is it like a 4-pillar alignment?
Yeah. So I really work on people that come into my clinic. So they're seeing me monthly, and I'm really working on the nutrition aspect, the movement aspect, what they're thinking, right? So we could call that behavioral, psychological, whatever you want to say. But that aspect, honestly, is one of the biggest things we have to work on because it's not easy to have to weigh yourself monthly and to have to start to care about a lot of these things and change. Basically, their whole life changes. There's no aspect that's not affected by this. And so when people are like, oh, just eat less, move more, it's like, okay, no, because there's a lot physiologically that's wrong and not functioning properly, but then also every aspect of life needs to change. And that just people need a lot of support for that. So I tend to have a very close relationship with my patients.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Let's talk more about behavior change, mindset, that identity shifting. If you're someone who historically is identified as being, I'm someone whose body just doesn't do what I want it to do. I'm always going to be heavy. I'm unhealthy, or whatever their thoughts are. I'm not good at exercise. I'll always gain the weight back. Like these ingrained thought patterns. And it's unusual for a doctor or anyone to be working with people this way. So more kudos to you. Tell me more. How do you do this with your patients?
So I did a lot of additional training with coaching and things like that because
Ah.
I knew that this aspect mattered and I wanted to be able to speak to patients more figuring out from their side what they thought was possible and not just like authoritatively saying, "Hey, you're going to do this," right? So one of the biggest things is obviously the aspect of awareness, but it's a tricky thing because you can't throw someone into shame, right? This we've already done that. And shame really stops progress because you stay frozen in that. Shame never leads to good things. So how do we get to empowerment? And I think we have to, those phrases that you said are incredible because that's exactly what happens. I lose weight so slow. Why does my body do this? We have to kind of let go of that and start to come back to, okay, maybe insulin resistance is really significant. This is making it really challenging for me. Here are the things I'm going to do. And we're not going to keep repeating those phrases because it's sort of like what you keep saying manifests. So we can't keep doing that. Otherwise, the same results keep happening, right? So it's very slowly, I work on these things with people. It really takes time. You cannot do a 180 overnight. You just can't. It doesn't last. So very slowly we look at, okay, what's there? Why are you thinking that? How could we change it? A lot of what I work on with people, and I'll just say how you bring the mindset with the genetics and things like that. So I'll do genetic testing with people, and a lot of the time they will find out that think like a hyper stress responder. So they have a little bit more cortisol that gets secreted in stressful scenarios. And then maybe it doesn't turn off as quickly. So if you checked like a morning cortisol level, it wouldn't be high, but all throughout the day, they're spiking more than others. So they feel so worn out by the end of the day. So if you have that profile happening, you have that genetic mutation, these are the people that do horrible with mass amounts of strength training. So I have this mutation. I'm the person that can do like 10 minutes 3 times a week, and I might be raving hungry throughout the week and need to back it down.
Mm.
And I do best with just like long walks, right? Things like that. That is something where I always used to think I have to bust it to get results, right? And it was like, no, I actually had to pull back on some things and increase other things. And I learned over time, you actually have great genetics. You're able to put on muscle. You have a lot of amazing things happening. So let's stop repeating that narrative. It's just that because of that amazing, you put on muscle and all this stuff happens, you are going to need to do it slower because your body doesn't want to release fat. So there's different profiles that we have. And if we start to work with that, we stop saying, I can't lose weight, this and that. You probably have amazing genetics in some capacity that you're hardy. Let me just put it that way. It's like you're just angry because it doesn't physically look the way you want it to look, but you actually might be a lot healthier than you realize. So sometimes rewriting those narratives really help people because it didn't come out of nowhere, the way in which you eat or how you think. It evolved over time from physiology, from biology. It came out of something.
100%. I love that. Yes. And I'm hearing your own story within it. And I'm curious your backstory and why obesity medicine. If we can zoom out for a moment, what pulled you into obesity medicine specifically?
Yeah, so I started in primary care. I thought I wanted to be an endocrinologist, and I realized, but I can do all of that in primary care. So the only thing you don't do is an insulin pump as a primary care doctor. But all day long, I loved patients with diabetes. Like if I could talk about blood sugar all day long, I'd love it. So I was doing all of that and I got so increasingly frustrated. I was always treating the high blood pressure, treating the heart failure, things like that, but we never had the time to get to what was happening. And primary care is something that, especially in the underserved area that I was booked out for 6 months in advance. That's not amazing. That's actually a real testament to how poor our healthcare system is that you can't have access for 6 months. So the point being, I was so frustrated with that. And then I started to have so many women that would be crying in front of me about their weight. And oftentimes it would be they'd had a bariatric surgery 10 years ago. No one had talked about what happens with regain, how it's a chronic disease. They hadn't offered them any other tools when they went for follow-up 1, 2, 3, 4 years in. So then they stopped engaging, right? And I started to see all this, and I actually tried within that system to change things. So I said, well, message me in 1 month, and I made handouts and I recommended podcasts. Like I was really trying because I believed in, getting all these patients the help. And then I just came to realize in a corporate medicine structure, this will never work because they're set up to have productivity and to push people through. And the reality is women physicians, we spend longer with people, we listen more, we have different emotional connections with our patients. Like this has been shown because I'll often hear the male colleague, he's like, I would just get in and out in 1 second. I'm thinking we would get roasted if we did that. And we don't want to, right? That's not the relationship that we want. So I saw all this. And then even with my own journey, I really tried coaching. I tried nutrition change. For years, I did a ton of work. I was able to lose about 30 pounds and keep that off. And then eventually I had to use a GLP-1 medication. I was able to then, lose an additional 50, 60, and I keep going. And I'm one of those 5, 10, 20 pounds a year for 5, 6 years that has done this. And it's been helpful for me to see from my perspective how hard it's been because I've not been one of those quick responders. I have a lot of empathy for my patients and I will never give up on them when some doctors kind of just give up at some point. And I know that there's always something else that we can do. So out of my own struggle, I sought answers. And then once I did that training, I realized no one knows this information because I already was a physician. I didn't hear any of this in primary care. So then that's why I got on social because people were really getting villainized for their weight, but no one was talking about the physiology behind it. And we have amazing studies. We know a lot physiologically, but if you don't present it in a way where people can understand it, it just stays in the academic tower, right? That's not helpful. So that's why I really started to get out on social. And I started my own clinic because I couldn't practice medicine the way I wanted to in the traditional setting.
Okay, amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing your story. So you've lost it slowly. Your own weight story. And are you now at a place with your weight that you're maintaining it? Are you wanting to?
No, I'm still losing. So It's been 5, 6 years. I like to think within 10 years, I'll be there. I mean, listen, I laugh, but the thing is this, I tried the version where I tried to do it faster. I would then turn back to binging or something that just didn't serve me, right? And so I really had to work over time with this is the pace that my body can handle. And I would rather what I achieve, it 100% will stick around versus you come down, you regain the weight. And if you regain that same amount of weight, you're not just getting back to the same weight, you have more visceral fat then. So there's all these things that people aren't realizing. So I really took the stance of I've had to come to terms with how quick my body can do it. And that's actually a big thing I've had to work on is just having a lot of compassion that, it's not really quick. You don't see the number every single day going down, but focusing much more on all the things that matter. And I think it helps you along the road when you do that.
Slow is fast and slow is sustainable. If it comes up slowly, you get to keep it, I like to say. And I think a physician that has lived this and has walked this and does the work that you do is so inspiring. And you have so much to share. When your patients get to a place where they have achieved, I like to call it their happy weight, their healthy weight, just if they feel good in their skin for them and their numbers look good, we're taught, and I say we're, like the standard of care, you'll hear doctors say, you're going to have to be on these medications for life. And that may not be a bad thing. The studies are not doing the things we've been talking about during this podcast. They're basically just taking the medication at higher doses and letting the medication do all the heavy lifting. Just eating less of maybe the foods and lifestyle, the foods that got you there. And you're not fundamentally changing anything. You're just eating less. So it would make sense that if you stop taking that drug, you will gain it back. and you'll be in a worse place because you've lost a lot of muscle.
Yeah. I will tell you what I see clinically is that, so when we're talking about these medications being lifelong, it's for people that have struggled for a long time. I'm not talking about the person that for 6 months had a depressive episode and put on 50 pounds and right away loses it. I'm not talking about the woman that goes through a pregnancy and loses it afterward. I'm talking about 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, you're struggling. The chances of you being able to lose that weight and keep it off, even if they're eating all whole-based foods, all the things, it is abysmal. And I'll tell you how I see it is that I work with people and they're doing all these things. They continue to do the same things. And without the medication, within 6 months to 1 to 5 years, there's always like a time interval for everyone, the weight is starting to come back on. And so the problem is that we have treatments, but once your physiology got to the place where it was sick, let's just put it that way, that's your baseline. That's where you come back to. So if people already are healthy and they're doing these things, that will work. That's why the person that only has like 10, 20 pounds to lose, they'll be able to lose it real quick. They'll be able to keep it off with diet. They're going to be preaching from the rooftop. You just need to eat better because here's the deal. They were not very sick to begin with. So they didn't have very much weight to lose. And I'm not downgrading their experience, right? Because I know they need to work hard too, but they are not as insulin resistant. They don't have as many things fighting them compared to if the weight set point's higher. So it's really a conversation. It's not black and white. It's how long have you struggled? What is going on for you? Was there a factor that was fixable? I'll give you a prime example. Someone working night shift. That person already, if they're sleep deprived, we know the blood sugar goes up. So it's like they already had something built in where a lot of the time we know that it's going to be a struggle. So maybe we got that handled. Maybe they had depression and that got treated. But if you have struggled long term with this, I do not see it be amazing people getting off medication. And it is not for lack of them abandoning what they're doing. It's that we had a treatment, we didn't have a cure. So we stuck you right back into the same thing and it occurs.
Makes sense. Makes so much sense. And it opens up a few questions. Do you work with the standard brand names or do you work with both and compounded?
I try to do name brand when I can, but here and there, I have some that are uncompounded.
Yeah. And aside from maybe people's thoughts about compounding versus name brand Mounjaro versus tirzepatide, is it safe to say it's easier to have more specific dosing and gradually move up and down when it's compounded because you aren't just limited to like with Mounjaro 2.5, 5, 7.5, 10?
That used to be the case, but that's not anymore because now with Zepbound being in a vial, you can do in between dosing. So that like literally as of the past year, that hasn't been true. But historically, that was the case where it was easier with compounded to adjust. I'll say the other thing too, and this is not just like a legalese loophole. Some people need things added to it that make them feel better. If they're nauseous through the roof, sometimes the B vitamins added with it will be really helpful. And so it's a thing where people think that companies are just saying that to be able to keep their compounded medication coming, but the reality is that sometimes that's really needed for someone to feel okay.
Makes so much sense. So if they need to have a lifelong relationship with the medication, what dose do you need? To release weight, you need, let's say, 5 milligrams. Just throw that out there. Once you reach your ideal weight, your happy weight, could you look at stepping down gradually? Like it would make sense that maybe you would try to maintain less medication might be better. Or do you feel like the dose that got you there is the dose you're on for life? Or do you go up?
It depends on the person. There are several different ways that this happens. One of the things that I think is the most predictive of if you need to stay on that dose or go down is when you reached your happy weight, were you significantly still losing? Like you were having no problem, right? Things were not slowing down, things were not plateaued. So if that curve was already pretty steep and you hit your weight and then we do need to back off because we don't want you to keep losing. So that's the person where we're going to back it down. The person where they were already massively struggling at the 5, right? Like they got to where they wanted to go, but they're like, struggle, struggle, struggle. They're probably going to need to stay on the 5. That being said, you can try to bring it down and see if they can do okay. One thing I like is the reason I'm meeting monthly with people is that we see these patterns and trends before it becomes a problem, right? So we can see if there's more than 5 pounds that are changing in a meaningful direction. So we can make changes. But so some will stay the same, some will go down. When you asked about going up, so the person that was struggling, let's say on that 5 milligram, and they're like, but they got there and they're staying there, that person, let's say 6 months, 9 months, 12 months down the road, they might now need a 7.5. So again, this is where you keep in touch and you figure out things. And it might also be related to they have increased stress during that period and they're trying to do all the things, but they're just more hungry and things like that. So we go up and then maybe we come down again. I don't see this being a static thing long term. I think sometimes you need less and sometimes you need more. And it's about having a close enough relationship where you can adjust it. But I'm always a fan of the lowest effective dose for the person.
Is there a way to resensitize yourself to the medication? So if someone's taking whatever dose they are and they're feeling like, this isn't working the same way. I hear that a lot. I need to take more. Maybe I should take more. And then they get nervous if they're having that conversation on the highest dose. Part of me feels like there must be a way to make you more sensitive to the medication or to resensitize you to the medication, whether it's taking a small break or I don't know what that is. Based on your clinical experience, what are you noticing there?
So I don't like the break part, and I'll tell you why. I'll just answer that first, and then I want to answer your question.
Yeah.
I find when people take a break and then they come back to it, it does not work as well for them. And I don't know if that's psychological, that they just the first time they ever took it, it felt so suppressive and amazing, and now this time it doesn't. So I really try to not pause medication or stop it if we were planning on keeping it, is my point. Unless there's like a procedure or a woman wants to get pregnant, right? There's a reason for it. But to your point, it's interesting. We don't have the studies yet on this, but I'll tell you, I did a continuing medical education here with a really amazing physician. And what this person was talking about is that with tirzepatide, so Zepbound Mounjaro, with it being a dual agonist, that what they're seeing is about 10% of the patients will start to gain weight at the highest dose. And they're not seeing this signal with semaglutide. So they have a lot of patients. And the thought being maybe because both receptors are getting activated, it's not as effective. And so what that person finds is helpful is to either decrease the dose some on Zepbound or tirzepatide, or to switch over for a period to Wegovy, which is semaglutide, and that we're not seeing that with just one GLP-1. We're only seeing it with the dual agonist. And so what's interesting is I don't see very much of that in my clinic, but I do know that there are people at the highest dose that they do really start to struggle, and I might have to bring in another medication. And so could it be that decreasing the dose for a period and then going back up, could that be helpful? Maybe, but the problem is when I've tried to do that with people, they get so hungry. And so it's an interesting thing that I just wonder where the research is going to go. This is an area where it's like you need to be listening to what other doctors are saying and you know what the online is saying, what everyone's saying, because often there's like a signal there, right? Like where there's smoke, there's fire, there's something happening, but I don't think that we have enough information for me to sit here and say everyone decrease the dose. And I will say that the one thing that I'm really not a fan of is when they say, well, stop all the medication and then retitrate yourself back up. It makes absolutely no sense. And I see what people do horrendous. So that's just like folklore online.
Why doesn't it make sense? Because it seems to make sense. If you build a tolerance by doing it continuously, wouldn't your tolerance go down by stopping?
You're not building a tolerance. So we have to be careful with the words we're using.
Okay, yes,
so
thank you.
When you say tolerance, it is still working. You're keeping that weight off. I mean, I don't see people regain weight, right? But it doesn't feel as effective. But what you need to keep in mind is that the body has metabolic adaptation. So just because, let's say we got 25% of your weight off and you're keeping it off, let's say you're on 15 milligrams, the top dose of Zepbound or tirzepatide. So you're keeping the weight off. You might not feel like it's as effective, but the weight's staying off. So what's happening is your body metabolic adaptation. Now you're having more urges and cravings and some of those things. Yeah, that's what was always going to happen with obesity. That was always the nature of the disease. Those hormones are fighting back. This is one pathway we're fighting against, but there are so many pathways involved in this. So our body is very elegant, right? It wants to put the weight back on. It wants to keep you safe. It thinks it's doing a good thing. But for some of us, it's a lot stronger than others. But it's not that it's not effective. It very much so is effective. It's that you don't feel how it felt in the beginning. That's the thing that people have a hard time grappling with.
That's a really good distinction. I'm noticing we're at the end of time, but there's something I just want to pull a thread a little bit. Maybe this will be a whole podcast in the future if you'd like to come back on. You talked about genetic testing and also your own experience with, imagine your body was good at gaining weight.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mine too. That's how I got into what I'm doing. I was 75 pounds heavier than I am today by the time I was 14. And my dad was a physician. My mom was a nurse. And, supposedly they had all the tools. Although if you saw what they fed us, it was clear that they never were taught any nutrition. And when McDonald's, fast food, Coca-Cola, like all the things, and we loved it. We are like, yay, great, take us through the drive-thru again. But anyway, my brother, sister, and I all ate the same foods. And I was the one with the weight problem.
Yes.
And so I got really curious and I felt a lot of shame about that. And it did lead to emotional eating because of that. But my mom took me to Weight Watchers when I was 10 years old. And anyway, a lot of stuff. I won't turn this into a therapy session, Dr. Rentea, but I could.
I can relate to, this is such a shared experience, unfortunately, with so many people. And our parents thought they were doing the right thing.
Oh, I know. God bless them. I know they, and put that on the shelf for a moment, but we got really curious about what was happening there. When you talk about genetic testing and, the disease of obesity, my body is really good at holding on to every calorie. It's probably a survival adaptation. I could eat the same calories as my sister and I would turn that into extra weight. I mean, who knows what was going on there. When you do the genetic testing, are you able to see if someone has a body that's just more prone to obesity?
There are some genetic disorders where they're called monogenic. So there's one gene involved. That is typically a little kid that you're going to catch, like before 5 years old. And those are incredibly obvious. Think like Prader-Willi syndrome, if anyone's listening. So that will catch very early on. Now, some of those ones that are caused by one gene are actually going to get missed. I've caught some of them when people are 30 or 40. So because no one ever did the testing, we do have a website. I hope I'm remembering the name right. uncoveringrareobesity.com, where it's free genetic testing if you're over BMI 40 right now, and if you had the problem from a young age. So they have all the criteria on there, right? But the point is that can actually catch some of those things. And we have some treatments that are different for that we're not thinking of in the traditional space because it has to be a certain gene that's affected. Okay, so that's one area. But the area that is more helpful, so when we do this other type of genetic testing, we're able to find if you have, for example, mutations in the receptor where you can sense satiety or not. And so you might be someone that everyone else around you is fine at the table, and you're like, I'm still so hungry. I could get a second portion. There's never an off signal. Like for me, it's like, we could just go grab another thing. It's no big deal, right? So some of that is a mutation that's a problem. And then we can do things for that. So for example, you need to start maybe with a protein appetizer to start to get the ghrelin to come down. You maybe need longer meals. You need different ratios of what you're doing. And you don't have those kind of targeted answers if you don't know what the mutation is. I mean, you can maybe over time, troubleshoot it and figure it out, but it much quicker helps you learn, okay, I do not need to over-exercise because I had that stress response. Ooh, caffeine, instead of just saying everyone can't have caffeine. No, there's just some of us, me, that are super slow metabolizers. So we either need less or none. And you just get those answers instead of having to kind of bumble through it and figure out the stuff trial and error. So is it magic? No. Genes are not your destiny, right? It's not everything's expressed. But I have found it to be very emotionally healing for many of my patients to do this testing because they're able to actually get a grip on some of the genetics that were causing it and that they didn't pick it. So it's very, very healing.
Yes. And those people would more likely need to be on the peptide, the medication for life, because it's fundamentally fixing something that's off.
Yes. Yes. It's like if you can't sense fullness, you have no off signal, right? We're giving you these GLP-1s. They're literally going into the central nervous system, into the hypothalamus, right? We don't have other medications that go that centrally, right? And so it's literally getting to the appetite center of your brain. Your desire for it is very different than physically the hunger not being there. It's two different things, but that's genetically linked.
It's fascinating. Fascinating. Oh my gosh, there's so much I want to talk to you about. Let's just do this. So excited to talk to you. Supplements. What's a good supplement or a bunch of supplements that someone could take that would complement well with the GLP-1 journey?
Oh, this is a loaded question because I think supplements need to be very customized. So I don't take a shotgun approach. I will say the one thing in general, everyone needs a good multivitamin, because when people are working on fat loss, which I'm assuming people that are on a GL, again, unless it's just for blood sugar reasons, people that are in my world are, they get weird with their nutrition, right? They're cutting out like the egg yolk, right? They're getting like B vitamin deficient. Like there's a lot happening. So a multivitamin, yes. Okay, but beyond that, it's very customized to, is constipation not helped with hydration, movement, fiber? You're doing all those things and we need something else. If you're losing a ton of muscle, do we need creatine, right? So to the genetic testing, actually, I have supplement recommendations based on each area of what's happening or not. So we have a very targeted list of, okay, you're going to need magnesium because you have this receptor problem where magnesium is part of that receptor working better, right? I don't think it's helpful to just take anything in the world. I think you need to look at what is going on, and then you go stepwise approach. And it's you don't start everything at once, otherwise you don't know what's helpful. So my thing is, people need to work with a physician that's used to this. Like with ashwagandha, like people just like everyone's randomly taking it. But it needs to be for the right person at the right time. So I think it's worth it to work with someone that can help you with a strategic approach and is not, by the way, that is not trying to sell you random stuff either.
So to close, if someone listening is early in their GLP-1 journey or feeling stuck or discouraged, what would you want them to understand about what real success on GLP-1s actually looks like over time?
Yeah. I would say get a full inventory of your health to begin with. Get full lab work. Get a body composition done. You need to also write down how you're feeling, how you're thinking. So I'm not able to go on a walk around the block. I can't get off the floor to play with my kids. You need to write all of this out. And then as you're going through the journey, you need to see what is improving. And what you're probably going to see is blood sugar comes down, the cholesterol panel normalizes, inflammatory markers go down if that's being measured. There's so much that you can look at there, right? So that's from a lab standpoint. From a body composition standpoint, is it going in the right direction? So are we keeping our muscle? That's already a win. Right? So we lose muscle every single year. So even if you're able to just maintain the muscle, let's say you never lost another pound, you never lost a pound of fat, you're actually winning, right? So that perspective is really needed to look at every single touch point that is not net weight. If we could throw that number out and never again look at it, what are all the things that you would look at? So does sleep improve? Do your relationships improve? The gut health, all of this, that matters much more than just the number. And that's going to take you time to figure out that that's improving. We don't have the privilege of seeing that right away. So you're going to have to give yourself long enough to work on this to see all of that happen.
Thank you, Dr. Rentea. This has been a pleasure. You're amazing. So excited we're going to get this podcast out there, and it's going to help a lot of people. Thank you.
Thank you.